I feel like I have to apologize because that was the dumbest intro I've ever filmed. So I am very sorry. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing the Get to Know the Sci-Fi Reader book tag. And of course I had to dress up like the sci-fi nerd that I am. So I channeled my inner T'Pring here, if you know from Star Trek, obviously. So I saw this tag on the channel Books with Emily Fox, which I'm a big fan, and the original idea comes from a blog called Falling for Romance. I'm going to link both down below so you can check them out. So I'm going to answer a series of questions about my sci-fi tastes, my favorite list, favorite books, tropes, all of that. Very fun. So the first question is, what is your sci-fi origin story? How you came to read your first sci-fi novel? So I don't really remember what my first sci-fi novel was. I really like, my mind is no thought, head empty, because I really don't remember. But as the little shit that I was when I was little, my dad is a really big sci-fi fan. It's his favorite genre. He reads a ton. He has read a ton when he was younger. So he was always like, oh, you really like to read? Read this book, read that book. And I was like, no. Because I was not a rebellious teenager, but I had my little rebellions. So every time someone told me, read this book, and I was like, no, thank you. But then I became a really big movie fan, so I started to watch all the Star Wars movie. I started to get into Star Trek. I watched the movie Artificial Intelligence, the Steven Spielberg movie, and then I became obsessed, and so I started reading sci-fi because it's so fascinating. The second question is, if you could be the heroine in a sci-fi novel, who would be the author and what's one trope you'd insist be in the story? Like for every question ever in my channel, I have two answers. The first one is, and you really shouldn't be surprised, is Diane Duane, the author of Spock's World and many other like sci-fi, and also I think she has many fantasy series out. How could I not? How could I not? She wrote, in this book specifically, a series of beautiful speeches. They're using a metaphors of two different alien species coming together to really think about if they can coexist in the universe, and it's a metaphor for diversity and acceptance and really people coming together to form a big community and learn from everybody's mistakes and differences. It was beautiful, super well written. She writes like a champ. And then the second one is, of course, Andy Weir, the author of The Martian. This is the Italian edition. So all the technological and in-depth like details about the biology of this man having to live on Mars for so many days without any aid was so fascinating to me. So I think both of these authors could write like my story in such a different and yet very similar way, I think, because the attention to detail is in both cases very attentive. And the one trope that I would love to have is Alien First Contact, because Diane Duane is a champ, as I said. Alien First Contact, like this would be the author to write it, because it would be so, I think, so in-depth and thoughtful. And then Andy Weir would be like hilarious, I think so, because he's this book was hilarious. It was also super fascinating. So Alien First Contact would be like so great to have. The next question is, what is a sci-fi you read this year that you want more people to read? All my Twitter followers know this because I've tweeted about it. It's my Twitter handle, like they know that. A novella that I've read this year, it's called 1776, What Football Will Look Like in the Future. I'm going to put it right here. So let's talk about it, because I cannot wait, because apparently I am the only one in the book community that has read this, and the sequel is coming out like in this month, so I am ecstatic. We are talking about, I'm going to use like big words here, speculative fiction multimedia narrative. Yeah, I had to look that up. So it's basically set in the distant future, and we follow three space probes who have gained sentience. These three space probes really exist. Two have been launched, I think, in the 60s and 70s or 80s, and the third one, it's been like built right now by ESA, so it's not been launched yet, but they have gained sentience, and they are really fascinated by humanity that is now immortal. There is no more birth, no more death, and they are really fascinated by American football. A game of American football in this year can span over a millennium of years and over thousands and thousands of miles, because we don't die anymore. So there's also a new technology that keeps humans from getting hurt. So games are crazy, uber crazy. And I talked about multimedia narrative because this story is told by hypertext. So it's basically mock text. So you have blocks of text from the three space probes. Then you have videos, you have GIFs or GIFs, I don't know. And then you have drawings and images, and it's great. It's so great, so immersive, and so like you really think about humanity and death and life, and it's also hilarious, like hilarious. And one, it's very short, it's a novella, it has won the Hugo Nebula Prize, and two, it is free on the internet. You don't have to pay a dime to read this novella, and it's probably the greatest sci-fi read, the greatest sci-fi read that I've read this year. So I'm going to link it down below because you have to read it, please. The next question is, what is your favorite sci-fi subgenre, and what subgenre have you not read much from? Now, again, I had to look those up because I have unintentionally read almost every sci-fi subgenre that there is, apparently. So my two favorite that I've read over the years, and I've discovered that I love them, are cyberpunk. A great example will be the movie Artificial Intelligence. So the focus is on cyber technology. And the second one is a space western. A great example is the anime and manga Cowboy Bebop. So yeah, the western set in space, which is like the coolest like subgenre that there is, I think. And the three that I would love to read more from, because I also love them, but I don't know, it's really difficult to find them and to find the right book for me, and are space opera, so you follow like spaceships, and then there are superhero books. Superhero books are my guilty pleasure, kind of like My Hero Academia or Boku no Hero Academia. And then it's not really a subgenre, it's more of a trope, but I really, really would love to read more of First Contact with Aliens books. Next is my auto-buy sci-fi author, and I think we all know who that is. If you've been on my channel for at least like one video, you know who that is. And it's Jeff Vandermeer. This is my, it's super shiny, but this is my Area X or Southern Reach trilogy. Everything that Jeff Vandermeer writes, I will read, even if it's like, I don't know, the grocery store list. And so I also have read Born by him. I don't have it right here. He writes, I think it's called biopunk sci-fi. It centers on nature and nature overgrowing us humans, and he only writes weird books. So if you like weird sci-fi books, those are like the best. Next question is, how do you typically find sci-fi recommendation? Now, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I go to the bookshops. I go into the sci-fi aisle of my bookshop, wherever that is, in whichever city I am, and then I just like roam around and browse the covers and the synopsis. That's how I do it. I never go, almost never, go into the library or the bookshops with a clear idea of what I want. I just roam around and look at all the books that there are, and I just like it like that. I've always done this since I was very, very little. Also, I'm starting right now not to be a little shit anymore, when I was younger, and I actually listen to my father's recommendations. So next question is, what is an upcoming release that you're excited for? Now, I have a few, so I'm going to be like very speedy about this. I'm going to put the covers right here. The first one may kind of shock you, maybe not, and it's Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Now, I know that I am probably the only one truly excited about this book because I don't know, I feel a very sense of kinship with Ernest Cline because the way he obsesses over little details in video games and science fiction and everything and TV shows, it's the same way that I obsess over things, like really tiny, minute details that really make my day. That's how I do pop culture, and this is why I loved Ready Player One, but also I loved the book that everybody hated but me, and it's Armada, his second book. And so I'm also very, very curious about Ready Player 2 because Ready Player 1 was such a great standalone. So what are you going to do with this world now that it has all been wrapped up? Like, I'm very curious. Next is To Sleep in a Sea Full of Stars by Christopher Paolini. The cover right here, part 2, because when you translate books, especially from English to Italian, they tend to get really long, and this book was already like 800 pages, so they chose to split the book in half. So I have the first half, already bought it, super excited. This is an adult sci-fi, I believe, and I think it may be close to a space opera, so super excited. But the second part is coming, I think, like in 1 or 2 weeks in Italy, so very, very excited. The next one is In the Quick by Kate Hope Day, and it has been described to me as Sapphic Astronauts, which is like everything I need in life. Next, I have Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Ha-lee, that I think it's coming like very, very soon. I may be wrong about that, or maybe it has already been published, I don't know, but I'm very excited about this book. And all I can say about the synopsis is dragon mecha, like robot dragons. And if you were the weird child that I was when I was growing up, does this cover not scream like Bakugan, like the Red Dragon Bakugan? Am I the only one? And the last one is Alone Out Here by Riley Redgate. And I've discovered this book from the channel Books and Lala, and she described it as Lord of the Flies in space. And like, I don't need anything else. Like, Lord of the Flies in space? Are you kidding me? That's like so cool. Next question is, what is one misconception about sci-fi you'd like to lay to rest? I would really like for people to know that sci-fi is not the inaccessible genre that you think it is, because you have to really separate the old sci-fi, that is called also hard sci-fi, from the newest wave of sci-fi. So let's talk about it. Old hard sci-fi, it's very plot driven. You don't really dwell in the psychology of the characters. You can have a huge cast of characters, but they are really like plot devices, because the setting and the plot and the repercussions of whatever phenomenon is happening, it's really what is impacting like the story. So you don't really get into the head of your characters, aside from some exceptions. The writing is also really dry sometimes, so if this is your genre, then more power to you. I really like hard sci-fi. I also really like the newer waves of sci-fi, so you get fewer characters, fewer main characters. The plot goes along with the psychology of the characters, so you really get into the head of these people who are going maybe to space or are like talking to robots and stuff like that. So it's really more about compelling characters going on a journey than the journey itself being the center of the story, and there are characters in the story. So a really good example of hard sci-fi, I think it's Jack Vance or James Blish, and then we have maybe Annie Weir, Nick Lake, that I'm going to like recommend you some books later. where you really get into the feelings and what the character is experiencing. So if you think that sci-fi is really not accessible to you because you read maybe something that was like so dry, so plot driven, then I urge you to really try some newer sci-fi. And then if you like, well, the plot is not really great, it's not interesting, I urge you to really try old sci-fi. So there are some exceptions, of course. Spock's World by Diane Duane, and all Diane Duane's books, I think, are really great at being all sci-fi, but the writing is not dry and you really get a really cool perspective from the characters. So there's always some exceptions. Now, next question is, if someone had never read sci-fi before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as a place to start, what would those be? Let's start with a book that not really many people talk about, but I think it's one of my favorite ever. This is Satellite by Nick Clegg. I've mentioned this before. Nick Clegg, this is the author. One beautiful cover. This is super shiny, but this talks about 3 young children that have been born into space, so they never set foot on Earth before, and they have to touch down to Earth for the first time. So they never like seen a real tree, never talked to a real person outside of each other. So you follow in particular one of the boys. The really cool thing about this book is the writing style. So imagine a child that has learned how to communicate in space. So they've never really like read a physical book and never really talked to a real person or had a real teacher growing up. So there are no capital letters, all dialogues are marked by an apostrophe. There's minimal grammar, but it's really easy to get into. It's also like a LGBTQIA book if you want to read some of that. And it's a really, I think, bittersweet book if you read this, and it's a very bittersweet look on humanity seen from afar. The second one, boy oh boy, this is probably the most famous book of the bunch. This is the 3rd book in the TheIlluminae Files. The first one is TheIlluminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Now, these books are very famous for being, one, very beautiful to look at, because like, look at that. But they are also famous for being kind of mixed media also. So this is what you'll find in these books: scraps of papers, and then you find transcripts, and then prose, because there are cameras that are looking at the main character, so transcripts, but also like drawings and conversation chats. So it's like being in a chat. So it's very big, but it's also like really not. I finished this in 2 days, I think. In the first book, you follow your main character. They are on a tiny planet that is in the crossfire of 2 companies that really want this. I think it's an asteroid or a planet. Let's digress. And so everybody has to flee on a spaceship, but there is this really conspiracy going on. There's also a plague that has broken into the spaceship, so they have a time limit to reach their destination. And so it's super action-packed, super easy to get into. It has kind of that teen juvenile writing, that it's juvenile in the right way, I think. While Aurora Rising was not for me too juvenile, this was the perfect amount, I think. So if you're looking for a place to start with sci-fi, like newer sci-fi, I think the TheIlluminae Files are perfect. Best for last, this is one of my favorite series ever, and also a series that I didn't realize it was actually sci-fi, because I was so immersed in the story. I was like, oh wait, yeah, we're in space. So again, I have the 3rd book in the series. This is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. The first one is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, also a very popular book, but I think like it really deserves to be as popular as it is. In the first book, you follow Darrow, who is a miner on Mars. So our society has evolved into one divided by castes, and they are each named from a color. So the golds, like they have these perfect, agile, strong bodies, and they are very rich. and they govern not the universe, the solar system. We are confined into the solar system, and then the reds are the ones who do all the hard labor, and the pinks are like the pleasures of society. So on Mars there's a rebellion, and then they quiet it down with kind of mass murder, so a genocide, and the only survivor, Darrow, who has lost the love of his life, decides to infiltrate the golds. So he modifies his body to become a gold and infiltrates their society to destroy it from within. And this series is so great because everybody is so cunning. Everybody is so intelligent and morally gray, and you follow this character who you have to fall in love with. The writing is very nitty-gritty, so there's a lot of like war talks and strategies and politics, which I personally love if done right. And this, I think, was really truly done right. So this is not as accessible as maybe the other two, but I think if you are a tentatively sci-fi fan, or if you've read maybe historical fiction about war, or maybe fantasy books, this is perfect. This is like truly perfect. So last question is, what is the most recent sci-fi reading content creator you've come across that you like to shout out? There is a channel who I love to death because they are so creative, their style is impeccable, the aesthetic is everything, and they read such cool and weird books that I think it's like super my style, and it's Life Goofer here on BookTube. They're amazing. I love them. Great content. I would really like to see their channel grow this year. I don't think this Shoutout is going to gain much, but I think it's worth checking out. That's what I'm going to say. I'm sorry. We've arrived at the end of this video. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. So socials, I have them there down below alongside some very important links. So please go check them out. And yeah, I think we'll see each other in the next video. So my Earthlings, goodbye.